What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back. And today, continuing our Distery series, we're going to be doing for the first time, a attraction that is now extinct. An extinct attraction, at least in Walt Disney World, at the Magic Kingdom, and at Disneyland. And I have to preface that because, well, we'll get to that later. So this is a little bit more of a controversial topic because Splash Mountain is even when it was opened, was an attraction that was kind of seen as, is that the right IP for Disney to be implementing? Now, the story starts, as a lot of times it does, at Disneyland. In July 17th of 1979, Splash Mountain opened to the public at Disneyland in what was at the time called Critter Country. It used to be called Bear Country, but turned into Critter Country for the addition of Splash Mountain. So kind of an interesting thing for people that maybe didn't know. It used to be Bear Country. Splash Mountain comes in, Critter Country. Obviously, the origins of Splash Mountain go back to what were they going to do with the former America Sings animatronics. And, that was a thought by Tony Baxter back in the day of, well, why don't we use Splash Mountain? Because Splash Mountain's characters are extremely similar to what they used for America Sings. And America Sings was an attraction that closed down. It took over the theater of Carousel of Progress once it went to Walt Disney World. And, the kind of interesting thing with that is there was a lot of controversy with America Sings, so they closed it, and the attraction, the inhabitants or the animatronics eventually went to Splash Mountain in Disneyland. And it kind of made sense. Of course, the birds that are fishing through the ride and little things like that were all a part of the kind of the next phase of what they were going to do with these types of attractions. And for Disneyland, a really important thing to them was to make sure that, they wanted this to be on the cheap, but also a quality attraction. And they were able to find the balance for both. So July 17th of 1989 was when Disneyland's version opened, and just 3 years later, in Magic Kingdom, October 2nd of 1992, Michael Eisner had the dedication ceremony of Splash Mountain at Walt Disney World. This is a flume-based attraction, as you can tell here from our little ride here. And the reason I'm doing this attraction now has a lot to do with, I think this attraction is going to be closing here very soon, and I want to have footage of this attraction here on the MC Parks server, because I think that this attraction that I really want to make sure is still in the history for people to remember. And I wanted to get this out because now we're talking about Tiana's Bayou Adventure, which by the time you guys are watching this video is going to be weeks away from opening. And obviously this attraction has a little bit of an interesting past. The IP used is from a movie called Song of the South. And a lot of people's, I think it depends on what you think about it. The consideration for cultural sensitivity comes up with this attraction, and the fact that Song of the South, I'm trying to think of the right way of wording this. It didn't really account for, it kind of glorified slavery. And I think a lot of people have, it's one of those things, it depends on how far on the spectrum you are with the cultural sensitivity narrative, but there is an argument to be made. And personally, I don't think it is that culturally insensitive, but the problem is, I think it's created more of a lore than it actually is, because you can't really watch the movie. Song of the South is not available by Disney. It's not on Disney Plus. It's not available anywhere really on the internet unless you go on the dark web. That's the only place you could really find any sort of movie of Song of the South. So it's not as bad as you think it is, but it's also, you can make the argument that it does glorify that time period, which isn't necessarily seen looking back as fondly as it is. There's a lot of great things about African American history in that attraction as well. You look at the actor who played the main character. He was, I believe, one of the first African Americans to be in a full length film. But because of the time period, he wasn't allowed to go to the premiere at the theater because African Americans were not allowed at the theater at that time. So it's one of those things where it was just, I don't know, it's a touchy subject, and I think Disney just wanted to get themselves away from it. And what's interesting is overseas in Tokyo, they still have Splash Mountain. They refused, according to the situation there and the Oriental Land Company, they refused to take out Splash Mountain, and they've actually increased upgrades and things like that. But I think the narrative in Tokyo is a little different than it is in the United States and the West. So, that's really cool. It's one of those things that I think isn't seen as much of a touchy subject there. And maybe one day that will change, but I think right now it's more so one of those things that it's just the way that the culture has kind of adjusted to things. It just was seen as an attraction that just needed change. And I have my thoughts about Tiana necessarily coming in. I don't think it's a great fit. I kind of get the sense that they kind of wedged it in there, but I will admit, from what I've seen online and construction and things like that, it does look like a very beautiful attraction. I just don't think it fits the theme of the area. And I think they're trying to change the narrative of that area and change the theme of Frontierland in its entirety. So maybe that won't be the case once their plans are fully done, once they redo Big Thunder Mountain, once they redo, eventually we'll see Pecos Bill turn into Tiana's Palace. I think that's just that's something we all kind of assume at this point. It's just inevitable. So there's going to be some changes here over the next little while that I think maybe it will fit in more. But I think people just miss Splash Mountain because it is a classic attraction. It's on that level of attraction of a Haunted Mansion or Space Mountain, and the history and the lore and everything behind this attraction. A lot of people are really upset to see this attraction go, and I do totally understand that. It's not similar to situations like Maelstrom or the Backlot Tour, where I think people were ready for it to go. A lot of people really weren't ready for this one to go away. Overall, there's an attraction that, depending on which version of the attraction, it's a 10-minute ride at Tokyo Disneyland. It's an 11 minutes and 45-second attraction at the Magic Kingdom, which was the longest version. And it was only 9 minutes and 18 seconds of a ride duration in Disneyland. So kind of interesting, 3 different versions of the ride, 3 different ride lengths, pretty much around that 9 to 10 minute mark, a little bit longer at the Magic Kingdom, almost 12 minutes. In Disneyland, there was 103 audio animatronics in this Splash Mountain attraction. And in Disney World, it was almost half that. It was 68 audio animatronics in the attraction. Another interesting thing in terms of the length of the ride and the number of drops, Disneyland's version had 3 drops in the sequence of the ride. Tokyo Disneyland's had 4 drops, which still exist today. And at the Magic Kingdom, there are 5 drops in Splash Mountain. And I think that will continue with Tiana's Bayou Adventure. A couple of other little things. At least for the version that came in, I think it ended up being, for Disneyland, it costed them $17 million to build the entire park in 1955. And it costed $75 million to build this one attraction in the 80s, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like I said, in 89, it costed $75 million. And like I said, $17 million to build the entire park of Disneyland just a few decades prior. So really showing you the rate of inflation and things like that, just how things change in a little bit of time. The original version was actually it was planned to open in 1989, but was delayed, and it had some technical issues and things like that. And obviously, it ended up opening in July of that same year. It was supposed to open in January, and ended up opening a couple months later in July. So, like 4 or 5 months. Another interesting thing in the 90s at Disneyland, um, the ride was nicknamed Flash Mountain. Now, it was a big deal back in the day where, as you were going down the drop, women were pulling up their shirts and flashing the camera on the drop down. So, obviously, nowadays they have, as you go down, the pictures are checked and monitored to make sure people aren't doing any, there's no profanity or any exposed breasts or bad gestures or anything like that. So, kind of interesting that at one time in the 90s, that was also a part of this ride. In January of 2011, the Magic Kingdom location received lap bars. So, for the longest time, it did not have lap bars, but that eventually changed in 2011. In 2018, just a few years before the attraction would close in Magic Kingdom, they had a sponsorship with Ziploc. And what's kind of funny is because when you go on the ride, you put your phone in the Ziploc bag to keep it from getting wet. So that was a really good tie-in and a really interesting sponsorship. Unfortunately, though, in June of 2020, it was announced that Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom attractions would be rethemed to the 2009 film, The Princess and the Frog. There were a lot of rumors leading up to that and a lot of speculation on what would end up happening. Obviously, in that time frame of 2020, there was a lot of stuff going on in our culture and protesting and things like that. And Disney, for better or for worse, ultimately pulled the trigger and said that we needed to make changes. And now we're at the point where we are just a few weeks, probably from the time of this video uploading, we are a few weeks from Splash Mountain opening in the Magic Kingdom. It'll be opening hopefully by the end of the year in Disneyland, but we actually have a confirmed date, which is June 28th, for when the Magic Kingdom's version of Tiana's Bayou Adventure will open. And of course, we'll be doing a video once the attraction opens. But yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of interesting when you look back in time and the lore of this attraction. It's an attraction that was hard for me to let go. I really do miss Splash Mountain. I loved the theming. I did like the film. I know people might say that is a very controversial thing, but I understand why they did what they did. I understand why people would find that culturally sensitive. But in my opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, I did enjoy the film. At the end of the day, though, I really am excited for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I think there's a lot of potential with this attraction. There's a lot they can do with it to make it something really special. And it does look really beautiful on the outside. I know a lot of people are upset with it. But to be honest with you, I mean, kind of just a broken piece of driftwood at the top of the mountain isn't necessarily the best looking thing aesthetically, and I think they did a really nice job. I think the water tower looks really nice. I'm trying to embrace it, and I'm a person that doesn't embrace change very well, especially with the parks. But this is one that it does hurt. This one does hurt, but I'm gonna see how the attraction looks. I want to see it open, and I think a lot of people need to see it open first. And once it opens, I think we can judge what this attraction will be like. But until then, I think we need to see what this attraction is before we truly dive into whether we like it or not. I think enough time needs to go by, enough things need to happen before we can consider this a bust or a success. So I'd love to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of Splash Mountain? And are you happy it's gone? Do you miss it? Are you happy they're replacing with Tiana's Bayou Adventure? Or would you have liked them seen, some kind of other replacement? I've heard there was a lot of other potentials like Zootopia. The Muppets apparently was something that would have been a really good opportunity to implement the Muppets into Magic Kingdom. But there's a lot of different things that could be speculated on. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and have a magical day.